Hi students, this is Dr. Miller and I'm going to go over assignment number 7. This is our first one that really is going to focus on photo editing, and it's a very exciting part of the course for most students. There's a lot you can do with editing. I do want you to use web-based or computer resident editing applications and not the applications that may be available to you on your cell phone. That's cell phone stuff is good, but there's a lot more capacity within the PC side of things, and also I think it's beneficial to be able to look at things on a bigger screen. So let's talk about what we're going to be doing. Now, if you already use some type of editing software, Photoshop is certainly probably the brand that people think of when they think of editing. It's pretty expensive and it's very complex. It takes a bit of time and learning to use it effectively. I use one that's called Photoshop Elements, and it's sort of like a Photoshop Lite. It costs, I think there's a student price for maybe about 80 bucks or something, or you get a subscription from Adobe for maybe 15 bucks a month or something like that. If you're serious about it, that's the one I would recommend. But I also recommend that you use one that is called Pixlr. Now, if you've got one, that's fine. But if you don't, use Pixlr. And here's the link right here. This is Pixlr.com will get you there. So there's certain functions that you do in photo editing, and there's a ton of them that you can do. This is where you can get real crazy, and there's a lot of horsepower with editing software, but you got to start somewhere, so we're going to do some basic ones. First one is cropping, and with cropping you're actually chopping off unwanted areas from a photograph, but it's the outer areas. You can do that to resize an image, or you can do it because you don't like stuff that's on the right edge. You can also recompose it, and one of the things you can do is you can turn a horizontal, like this one here on the left. This is the original, and then within Pixlr, this is the cropping, what the cropping dialog looks like, and then this is what we wind up with. We have a vertical made from a horizontal. Another thing you can do on the cropping is you can use cropping to reposition your subject, your main subject of your photograph, into a better position in terms of the rule of thirds. And that's another opportunity to kind of recompose the photo. Let's go down here and, okay, rotate. Rotate means to go 90 degrees to the left or 90 degrees to the right. It's sometimes when you're shooting, particularly with a cell phone, you wind up with a photograph that's 90 degrees off of what it should be, so in the editing you can rotate that. You can also do a thing called flip, and that is where you keep the image the same, but it's reversed. Now, if you've got lettering, it's going to show up backwards, so be careful about that. But there are times you want to do a flip on an image so that the main subject is on the left side instead of on the right side. Most of the software is going to have something called an automatic image enhancement, or something along those lines. Auto levels is what it's called in Pixlr, and what that does is it lets your software kind of automatically correct an image. Now, I do this all the time, but a lot of my friends that are real serious photographers, basically they laugh at me for doing it. But I'm generally happy with the results. One of the things I have a problem with, believe it or not, I have color confusion and definitely mess up colors sometimes. So if I use the auto function, it basically sets the colors to be pretty much what they should be. So let's look here. Here's an original of a photo of the moon, and in order to get any photo at all with my camera, I had to do a long exposure, and it wound up just kind of washed out. So when I put it into the auto enhancement, we've got the sky to the actual blackness of space, and we can now see features on the moon. And that's what the auto correct or auto level will do. Now there's another setting that's called contrast and brightening, and you can do that instead of the auto enhancement, or you can maybe try the auto enhancement first, and then if you want to do more, you basically drag sliders for both the brightness, and of course bright goes from white to black. That's the range of brightness. And then contrast is the difference between the darkest part and the lightest part. So one photograph that has very little detail, like this middle one in here, or this one on the left, is even worse because it's underexposed. This one in the middle is exposed better, because you can see like it's got clouds and so forth, but it's got a little more detail in here. And then here on the right, you can see that there's better detail here, but it's over exposed to the point where you lose the clouds. So playing around with these sliders for contrast and brightness, you want to try to find the right place to make your photograph look good. I'll tell you the truth, most photographers do not get enough contrast into their photographs, and they also tend to be slightly overexposed. So oftentimes I'll start by pulling my slider to the left to make it a little darker, and then sliding the contrast slider a little to the right, which will bring a little more contrast to it. But these are things that really, in order to understand editing, you just have to do it. Color adjustments, that's another thing. This is the Pixlr interface for color adjustment, and you have 3 sliders. One is hue, and that's the actual color itself. So if you slide from left to right, you're going to get more red in one area, you're going to get a purplish, you're going to get an orange, and that kind of thing. And then the one that is frankly most useful is saturation, and that's the amount of color that's in your photograph. And if you want the photograph to have a little bit more color, even after you've auto enhanced it, you can slide this saturation bar over. And then the bottom one is actually a brightness for color, and it's another way you can kind of manipulate that aspect. Now there's a really cool thing in these editing software packages that's often referred to as the healing tool. And I told you at some point that I have kind of this thing about power lines in photographs. For the most part, you're trying to take a nice landscape and you've got, you know, a power line going through it. Well, using the healing tool, and you can find it in Pixlr over here on the left, it looks like a band-aid. And you can see over here where I've got this original photograph here, I'm going to use the healing tool, and it'll make like a circle. And what you do is you drag that circle over the thing that you want to get rid of, and Sometimes it works if you do it all in one stroke, and sometimes it's better if you do it kind of bit by bit. The reason I had the bananas up here was because these were overripe, so I used the healing brush to get rid of some of the spots. But this, go back to this shot here, you can see in this one that light tower is gone. So when you have photographs and you've got like some trash in them, or you've got maybe a can or something, maybe you have a light pole or power lines, you can try this healing brush. It doesn't fix everything, and if you overdo it, it doesn't look right. So just try it out. It's great, for example, for portraits. If you've got a face and they've got a blemish, a zit, let's say, you just put that healing brush, circle over it and press it, and see if it gets rid of it. You can also get rid of some wrinkles. It's really a cool feature. Another thing you can do within editing is you can set the size of the image you're working with. And there's different ways you can do this, but what I want you to do in this case is to actually create a particular size, and that is measured in pixels, and pixels are picture elements, and they're the dots that make up photographs. And with really good cameras, you get tons of pixels, and with less expensive cameras you don't get as many pixels. That's really one of the primary differences between a cheaper camera and a more professional camera. But the pixel is a unit of measurement, and so in the Pixlr editor, when you create a new image, you get this dialog box, and you can put in the width and the height. So for this exercise, I want you to use the height that is for a Facebook cover image. And maybe some of you don't use Facebook, but it really doesn't matter. You don't have to put this image on Facebook. It's just an exercise. But if you do use Facebook and you want to change that big banner picture that's at the top and do a really good job of it, use the dimensions of 828 pixels wide and 315 pixels high. There's a video in the folder, and it's called How to Make a Facebook Cover Picture Using Pixlr. Pretty simple. The video shows you a way of taking a particular image and making it into this 828 by 315 size. This way that I'm describing now is you create the space, and here it is, this white space, and then you open another image, and basically you copy and paste that image in this space right here, and you may have to do some adjustment with it to make it fit right. A good trick to do, and I'll show you 3 examples that I've used as Facebook covers, just to show you the kind of the variety of stuff that could be a Facebook cover. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you exactly what to turn in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is use that crop tool, and I want you to do 2 different photos, crop each photo. One of the photos, though, I want you to use the cropping to take advantage of the rule of thirds. So, for example, this is the cropping grid. When you click on the crop button over here and then you drag across, you get the area that you're going to crop. Then to actually make the crop, you click that button again. But see this, this trumpeter is right in the middle. This is a problem that I've seen from some of the work you've submitted. and that is a tendency to put the main subject just flat in the middle. And there's two things. It's not as interesting because, as we know, the rule of thirds really tells us that when you have this grid and you have the intersection of the vertical and the horizontal, there's 4 areas that work, and here's one of them. And so when I crop this, I've got a better composed photograph, and our eye tends to go to this area here. The other thing is it kind of gets rid of some of the stuff over here that isn't necessary. Now, I use the grid, but if I'd used my eyes only, I probably would have gotten rid of even more of this stuff over here. Even though that's slightly out of the perfect spot, I think that would have been better. There's also too much headroom here. Headroom is the space between the top of the subject's head and the top of the image, and this is too much. All right, I'm going to have you submit 2 different photographs where you rotate one and you flip one. Now, in both of these cases, you're going to have an original photograph, and then you're going to have the flipped version of that original photograph. Then you're going to have a second photograph, and then you're going to rotate it, and you're going to turn in the original and the rotated one. So there are 2 different photographs that you'll be graded on, but I also want to see the original one that you've already done. Now, the instructions told you this. I'll tell you again. You don't have to shoot new stuff. Just use what you've already done for this class. You can make some of the photographs, and particularly if I made comments, maybe I said didn't do the rule of thirds, or maybe it's overexposed, or things like that. This is a chance to fix it. All right, so the next one is the autocorrect function. And again, just 2 different images, hopefully different times and different places, and use the autocorrect function. Now try to find ones where the autocorrect actually makes a difference. Sometimes the autocorrect doesn't make any difference because basically your camera did a good job of capturing it as it is. But we're trying to show you how you can enhance and better your photographs. So see if you can find a couple of them that do that. Now submit 2 different photographs, one where you're using the contrast and one where you're using the brightness. And again, you're going to send the original for each of them and then the edited one for each. And again, also, let's try to do something where the edited one actually looks better than the original one and that there is some difference. And then we're going to have the healing function. Find a couple of photographs that have some not really big areas but some small flaws, and maybe using some of your portraits, for example. Get rid of some unwanted features. Maybe you've got a good landscape but it has power poles or power lines in it. Again, original and an edited one, 2 each. And then we're going to have you submit 1 image that you create. And I'm also going to have you do one that fits the faceback format, which there's a total of 11 images that will be graded. And remember that some of these you're also going to submit the original ones with it. So watch all the videos and read the articles, but you really have to get in there and play around with the stuff. So good luck on this assignment. If you have any questions, please let me know.